James Schramko here. Welcome back to my podcast. Something special today. This is episode 1130, and it'll be up wherever you see my podcast. Today we're going to be talking about a $15 million decision that a friend of mine, Dan Norris, had to make. He had a business that was doing $16 million in revenue. It was Australia's number one craft brewery. A personal stake of his was worth about $15 million on paper at least. And he built something absolutely incredible, and then he walked away from it and he sold those shares worth $15 million for $1. And today he's facing a $1.97 million debt notice, and the company collapsed with $7.2 million in debt, and he's selling everything he owns to survive. The following episode contains a personal account from my guest, Dan Norris, about his experiences as a co-founder of Black Hops Brewery. The views and opinions expressed are entirely his own, based on his personal perspective. I, James Schramko, am not making any allegations, verifying any claims, or endorsing any opinions expressed. I have no first-hand knowledge of the events described, and this podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only. Dan has shared many of these views in his book, Black Hops Down, and on his website at dannorris.me. Please keep in mind, this content reflects his perspective only, and others involved may have a different view of events. All individuals named or discussed are presumed to be acting lawfully unless proven otherwise. This podcast should not be considered a substitute for legal findings or investigative journalism. But this is what makes this story a little bit different from every other business failure you've ever heard of. Dan didn't lose because he couldn't build a business. It's because he grew one that grew crazy fast. And it turns out that success itself was about to become his biggest enemy. So we're going to be dissecting exactly how a $16 million business became a liability, why partnerships evolve in ways that can destroy you, and the hidden traps that really only appear after you have already won. So welcome, Dan Norris. Thank you for appearing on the podcast today.
Well, that was the most depressing interview I've ever had in my entire life. So thank you for capturing what happened. And in case I forget, I wanted to congratulate you, totally off topic, of the amount of years you've been doing this, the amount of episodes you've done. It's amazing. When you hit 1,000, I was like, that's crazy. But 1,100 is mental. I've been following you for so long. So thanks for having me again.
Oh, well, thanks, Dan. I mean, just for a little bit of context, I think it's worth recapping our story. I first became aware of you when I found some YouTube video of you raving about my product, Traffic Grab, and you weren't an affiliate of it. You'd bought it and you thought it was good and you wanted to share that with others. And I immediately thought, this guy, there's something about him. He's not like an IM slime bucket. He's got integrity and cares about people, and he's just really transparent. And then, I knew you when you were a struggling web developer, but before you cracked your first big success, WP Curve, which just went awesome, and you sold that, big exit. And then you went into the brewery. You gave me a first batch bottle of eggnog stout, my place in Manly. We've been surfing together, and when I came up to Queensland, I've seen you in the highs, I've seen you in the lows. Bit of a low now, but with you, I know it's only the tiniest blip because I know you. You're probably the most transparent reporter of anyone I know. You just tell it like it is. I so truly admire that about you. You're very different to me in that regard. I guess I'm too private or too worried about what people would think, I think, to go to the lengths you do. And lately, you've been posting some social media. There's been a couple of news articles about this, and people have actually been asking me, what's going on with Dan or whatever. And you put out the invitation to do a podcast about it, and I said, yes, please. Let's get it out there. I'm sure you just going through this phase of talk about it and then get on with the next thing. And boy, oh boy, you've been through a lot, mate. I feel for you. Digital hugs all round, right? And we know people in our industry who didn't even make it, and tragic consequences. But I know you're going to come through this, and I think it's sharing this story has got so many valuable insights for others, and that's really what you're all about. You are a giver, if anything.
Well, I hope it is valuable because it comes with a lot of personal risk, and I've weighed up the pros and cons, and I'm constantly going back and forth, as recently as an hour ago about whether or not I should put out the content that I've put out. And for some context, I sent you a copy of the book that I've written yesterday, and that'll be out by the time this podcast comes out. It's a crazy story. There's more that's not in the book as well, like threats from directors. Only a couple of days ago, I got a threat. I can read it to you from one of the directors that was pretty intense. So yeah, it's an intense time. I really hope in the long run that my judgment that telling the story will be more beneficial to people than not. And it will come with some short-term pain for sure, because there's a lot of people who don't want this story out. And but I think long-term, there's so many lessons in here. Like, I've always shared my lessons. It's consistent with what I've always done. And the last couple of years, after reading the book, it's been insane. And that's just the Black Hops story. There's the whole other story with my current business, which obviously we won't get into, but it's the last couple of years has just been, I don't even know what's real anymore, to be honest. It's just that crazy.
Well, I do get your email newsletters, and I have been in touch with you back and forth privately, and been meaning to catch up with you when I get back down that region, because it is interesting. I want to show my support, but I totally get why people wouldn't want the story out there. It's like, you sent me the book. I opened it just to check it out, because obviously I felt a duty of understanding what I'm going to be podcasting about. Holy fuck. I just couldn't stop reading it. I'm like there, and it was like I got back from a nice dinner out, and I started reading it on my phone, and I'm just scrolling through. I got most of the way through it last night before my eyes were closing. I just couldn't stop. A gripping thriller. I suspected that some of the things you've been sharing might have been from your books. You've got the most rapid authoring system of anyone I know. You just punch things out there. You've published a lot of books. So you've got yourself in a few sticky situations. I'm just wondering, at what point did you realize that the business was starting to get dangerous?
Well, we did a huge crowdfunding round at the end of 2021, and we raised $2 million. It was the biggest one the industry had ever seen. It was, 1,000 investors, a lot of people we knew, but a lot of people we didn't know. And at that point, the business was absolutely cranking. We did, I think, $16 million turnover that financial year. We're growing, doubling every year. It was absolutely cranking. We had a huge expansion underway. And Govs wanted to make a change to the production roster to help us grow to the next stage. And that involved going from 5 days a week to 4 days on, 4 days off, and effectively doubling the team of brewers. And in 2022, I'd say it was towards the start of 2022, I could tell that the business was no longer growing the way it used to grow. That financial year wasn't a decline year. It was still a growth year. But I monitored the finances month by month, like religiously. And the start of 2022, I could tell that the business wasn't growing the way it used to grow. And the production wages were going up and up because of the new roster. And I started the process of trying to go back to the old 5 day a week roster and restructuring the brewery, put a new manager in there that wasn't Govs. Obviously, Govs hated that. He ended up leaving as a result, and shutting the production system down the day after he left, which is, I think I mentioned in the book. I can't even remember what's in there. Well, his friend did anyway, and he didn't do anything about it. So that was extremely messy. But, we were in the process of restructuring the brewery back to 5 days a week, because effectively the wages had gone up by $1 million overall. And by the time we got to, towards the end of 2022, I projected the business would lose $1 million the following year, and the wages had gone up by $1 million, and we're doing the same volume. So to me, it was pretty black and white. Like, we could get back to at least a break-even position just by restructuring the brewery. But by the end of 2022, obviously a lot happened in 2022, which I'm sure we'll get into depending on how much time we spend talking. But by the end, I had really serious concerns about the solvency of the business. And I was pretty much convinced that the projections the business was giving the banks and the investors were completely and utterly inaccurate. Like, not out by like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, but out by millions. And with information in there that any kind of rookie finance person should be able to see. Like, there was really rookie errors in those numbers. And to me, no one is that stupid. To me, there's something going on that was more than just mistakes. So I was super concerned. And then at the same time, I had this whole relationship investigation going on, which, again, if we get time, we'll get into it because it was an important part of the story. But by the end of 2022, I was pretty much convinced that if something didn't happen about costs, this business was going to collapse. And if nothing was done, it was just going to continue to rack up debt and a whole bunch of people were going to get screwed. And obviously that's what ended up happening. But it really, at that point, towards the end of 22, start of 23, was like getting to the point of being too late, I thought. And if the directors didn't do anything, which they weren't prepared to do anything on costs, then it would go the way it went. And so that was the rough timeline.
Yeah. Okay. So it basically accelerated, and you've got all these side plots. It'd be a 3 or 4 Netflix season story. I reckon we can probably paraphrase a little bit of it to get some context to the situation. But if I understand this correctly, it was 3 mates. They thought, we'll have a brewery. Even before it got started, one of the mates wasn't financial, so there was a slight little hiccup there. You ended up being a majority shareholder. You kind of each went into your own areas. One guy's making the beer, another guy's running the shop, and then you're doing the marketing, which obviously you're brilliant at. And then it started getting serious and going better, and then you needed bigger facilities, and you're winning awards, and there was a lot of camaraderie, and there's like big events. There was a bit of normalized drinking. You started a couple of little relationships with some of the team members here and there. That caused a bit of politics. It also doesn't help when the other partners or they're still actually in the business. And then at some point, you're profitable and expanding, and you've signed a personal guarantee on some equipment loan from a founder-friendly bank. And then later, when things are starting to get serious with the financials, you've got some people who weren't amazingly good at their job that you're questioning what's going on there, and then they've asked you to kind of sideline yourself while they're concerned about blowback. And part of the blowback was based on a previous incident where there was a bit of turmoil, some really bad press. It must have been frightening when that happened. You did something that you thought was amazing. The public hated it. The whole industry turned on you, and that was basically the precedent that caused them to be a bit conservative when there was like a bit of furor about personality and relationships. I guess you've really experienced how difficult can be when you're having relationships, but also in a business space. You've got multiple relationship dimensions here. You've got 3 partners, which is probably a terrible number of partners to have a business. You've got personal relationships, and then there's financial pressure squeezing you the whole time. Like, at what point did you feel out of control?
I mean, in 2022, like you did kind of skim over the the relationship stuff. It was a more serious situation than just a few too many relationships. Like, there was a whole investigation around it. There was, people launching all kinds of allegations at me. I've written about it publicly and in the book. And we don't have to go into every detail of it, but it was more than just, I was in more relationships than I should have been, but it really hit the fan.
It was like 3, wasn't it? 3 in 6 years or something?
Yeah. And there was one other sort of brief hookup, which I don't go into too much detail on because I don't think it was necessary. But when me and Aaron got together, that was when it all completely went to shit, because my ex-partner was still in the business and her ex-partner was still in the business, and a bunch of those people just exploded, and the whole thing exploded. But you're right in that Eddie had no appetite for bad publicity. He was terrified that Matt Kierkegaard was going to write an article about it, and but that wasn't his only concern. He was also concerned that half the team would quit because a lot of them were so upset about what had happened, which was also a valid concern. All that was going on. We had financial struggles that year. I was in my head, I was like, man, this is something needs to be done with these finances. I couldn't convince Eddie to change the production roster. He thought all the brewers would quit if we did that. Maybe he was right. I don't know. We never did it, so we'll never know. But 2022 was a very, very stressful year. And obviously, for the second half of 2022, I wasn't there. When they started the investigation, they said, go home, don't ever talk to anyone at Black Ops, don't ever go into a Black Ops venue until all this is over. And I agreed to it because I thought the process would last sort of 3 or 4 weeks and I could get back to work. Eddie went overseas somewhere, so I don't know who was running this company. But this process took like 8 months, like the entire thing.
That seems an excessive time.
It was completely insane. And like every week, every day, I'd be like, guys, we need to do something about this. Like, even if it's like, at one point I went back to Eddie and Tony and said, let's just go back to all the investors and say, this is everything that's happened. We're not really sure what to do about it because we weren't. It needs to go either way. It needs to be like, okay, Dan, this is too inappropriate or whatever, too much bad publicity. You're gone. Someone else, you leave, stop paying you. Someone else comes in. We had a new GM that was starting, but he was supposed to report to the directors. He wasn't supposed to, run the entire thing. He didn't have any shares or anything. Or, if the investors said, look, this is fucking messy, but the CEO and founder and the guy who's raised all the money in the marketing needs to get back to work. And if some people quit, they quit and we rebuild and we get back to work. And I thought it would probably go in that direction because it was their money. And
it's like when they tried to bring in Holy Cross to Zappos or something, a couple of people quit, some people stay, and then you're back on. The irony of all of this is...
there's a lot of this kind of messy stuff in businesses all the time.
One of your prime investors gave you his opinion and didn't seem too bothered about it, right? Or you were offered to get his opinion and put some weight on it. And you also have a degree in HR and you had an HR advisor. So I guess you had all these different points of reference that could have been drawn on other than an outside expert.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the first time it happened, I went to the HR person and said, look, this is what's happened. There's never been a situation where there's been a conflict of interest. I haven't been involved in any recruitment or anything. We worked in different parts of the business. There's no policy where you have to disclose your relationships, which I was always against. There's no policy that said you can't have a relationship at work, which I was also against because there was other people that had relationships at work. And I think that's where most people meet each other. I'm fully aware it's messy, and there's a lot of people listen to this and just say like the boss should not be dating staff, which I fully understand that. But when I met Erin, I just knew, and I knew that we were going to be together, and I wasn't going to ask her to quit her job, and so it happened, and it had to be dealt with. And the first conversation I had with the HR person was, there's no conflicts, everything's consensual. There's some pissed off people, and my ex is uncomfortable at work, of course, because she fucking broke up with me, and worse, which I won't go into. But then she has to work with me, and it's always going to be very uncomfortable. It's bloody uncomfortable for me too, and a lot of other people. But that's what happens when you date someone at work. You have to turn up at work the next day, and they're still there.
That's right. Where do you stand with the relationship? You're still with Erin. That sounds like it's stronger than ever.
Yeah.
What about with the other two partners?
I imagine they hate me. I mean, there's a lot of people that hate me. I can tell because when the content comes out, the stories come out. I don't check the comments because there's a lot of anxiety associated with all of this. Is like I have to just keep that in check. So, but I do check my emails and I check my DMs, and I have seen a few comments here and there, and so I imagine they hate me. I don't know. I don't talk to them. I think if you read the whole book, you'll understand why I don't talk to either of those guys. I have no interest in doing it.
It just seems like there was, it definitely from your perspective, of course, everyone's probably got their own story, but your story is pretty compelling as to how it's been difficult. But I mean, the one that just raises the anxiety when I'm reading that book is you've been forced out of the company more or less, but you're still on the hook for the personal guarantee. And then they start running it into the ground. And I mean, I imagine that's what's driving a lot of this, this frustration. And I guess this is one thing you can do. Like, you've got the power to tell your story. Can we talk about that one signature that literally, it's got you over a barrel at the moment?
Yeah. Well, I remember it pretty vividly because when you sign a personal guarantee, you have to get a lawyer to talk you through what it means. And me and Eddie went down to the law firm here in Churn Park, just down the road where I now live. and it was like a Better Call Saul type situation with the lawyer. It was like this guy was just doing the easiest work he can do, and it was a $500 fee to sit there for 5 minutes and explain it to me. But in my head, it wasn't a huge risk because the assets of the business were worth more than the debt at that point, like way more. We put in a huge production line. We had a lot of assets. It was a manageable debt, but it became a huge problem when I left, and all the warning signs around all the other debt in the business were ignored. Like the loan was only 3.5 million or something, but by the time it collapsed, the debts had gotten up to $7 million. And
they were playing chicken with the ATO as well, by the sound of it.
And like they had multiple millions of dollars owed to the ATO. And when the voluntary administration process finally kicked off in whatever it was, April 2024, more than a year and a half too late, there was nothing to salvage. And so all they could do is basically liquidate the business, and Judo Bank had to agree. Well, they didn't have to agree. They agreed to a deal where some of the debt went to the new owners, and it was reported at the time that they just wrote off the rest of the debt. Keeping in mind that Judo Bank had sent me a document to sign over my shares so I could give away my guarantee. This was a year and a half before. So it was their idea for me to give the shares back to the business so I could get out of the guarantee. So
did you sign it?
Yeah. I signed that one. And then when it came to the actual document where Tony, the other director, was going to take on a small guarantee to replace mine, he didn't sign that. And I chased him for months and months, and then the thing went to VA, and that was that.
Do you think that there'll be any recourse out of this? Do you expect that there might be charges laid against anyone for directors' duties and that sort of stuff?
Well, when Deloitte published the administration report, they pretty much said in very specific language that that it was their opinion that the company had been trading insolvent since December 2022. And that was the date of the board meeting when I went to the directors and said, we need to do something about the finances like now, or we will be done by February. And by the time February came around, I was out. I was like, I can't. If I stick around, I felt that I would have been committing a crime by sticking around, because I felt the company couldn't pay its debts. And there's a lot of definitions of insolvency. And in the VA report, which is a public document, it goes through the various things. And I'd spoken to a VA expert prior to this. I'd gotten legal advice, and to me, all the signs were there, and I was very, very nervous about that. But whether or not it gets prosecuted, ASIC have bigger problems on their hands, I don't know. But that's what the Deloitte report said.
I mean, maybe the investors are upset about losing their money.
Hopefully. I mean, they should be. I mean, I'm super sorry for my role in everything that happened, and I feel.
But you also
like
lost
the investors were not represented.
Well, $14,999,099.
Well, I lost everything financially that I've gained. I mean, I haven't fully lost it yet, but this house I'm sitting in is now sold. This is the only thing I've got left. Judo coming after me for $1.9 million, which is a hell of a lot more than I actually have. So, depending on how that goes, there's every chance that I will lose everything, including, none of the money I bought the house with came from Black Hops. I never took any money out of Black Hops other than a wage. That was money I made from the sale of WP Curve. Yeah. And I bought the house in Mermaid Beach, which I had to sell because I couldn't afford it. Used the rest to buy this house, which Judo forced into a sale. And, I don't know how it's going to end, but in all likelihood, I'll end up with absolutely nothing.
I'm sorry to hear that. It's very painful, even as someone who I've known you for a long time, and I feel that I can only imagine the psychological impact of this. I mean, to claw back to your previous win is like even worse than just taking from the Black Hops. Does this raise any sort of hindsight thoughts for you about asset protection or company structures, or like, I mean, this is the opportunity I could ask. What would you advise someone listening to this who might be asked to take on loan or to sign a personal guarantee?
I mean, I've made lots of mistakes in this. And when you say psychological impacts, like this, it's very complicated because I do have also a lot of guilt. I was the CEO of this company. I created a situation that was messy, bad for the culture. I essentially triggered this whole thing. I was the one that raised all the money from the investors, basically personally. And I knew a lot of these people, a lot of them are family, friends, people listening to this podcast probably invested in Black Hops. Not all of them, but some of them would have. So I have a lot of guilt associated with that. I feel really bad about that. I have a lot of anger towards, the way that process went, and obviously a lot of sadness. It's been a few years, but in terms of like practical things, one really, really obvious one is just one around company control. Like I always thought that me and Eddie were the only two directors, right? The entire time. We both had essentially equal voting rights. We both basically agreed on everything. Eddie's quite an agreeable person. He basically reverted to me on almost anything. If he didn't agree on something, he'd sort of say yes, and a couple of days later come back and say, "Oh, I'm not quite sure about that." And then I'd be like, "Okay, that means he agreed to it, but he didn't actually want to agree to it." So we had that kind of relationship where we understood each other. We were best mates for 20 years. I was the best man at his wedding once, and then invited to be the best man at his wedding a second time, which didn't happen because of COVID. I knew Eddie really, really well. But having a 50-50 voting split like that is good until you don't agree. And then it's really bad and that's what happened with the whole relationship thing. Like, he didn't know what to do. I was like, I need to get back to work urgently. So that's how we brought Tony in. I said, well, we need some kind of deadlock breaker. Get Tony in. If he sides with you, I'm out. If he sides with me, I get back to work. And that's the only way I could solve that situation, which obviously I regret that too, because that whole situation with Tony as a director was a disaster. But it does come back to actual control. Like, I had with my current company a situation more recently where we lost a huge customer to the point where it was, most of the company's profits. And we had to act within days, and I had to make decisions that were really difficult. It involved losing employees, losing tenancies, scary shit. But I have 100% control of that company. I can make whatever decision needs to be made. And so that makes a very big difference. And so I have signed personal guarantees for the leases we have with this company, because it's 100% on me. But if you've got a situation where it's not 100% on you, you got to be real careful signing stuff like that, because this story, you can see how that can unravel so easily and so drastically. And so that's the one thing, the personal guarantee thing, you got to be careful with. I can't say you should never sign one, because you have to. If you want to take out, if you're a physical business, you have to do that stuff. If you want a loan, you have to do it. If you want a tenancy, you have to do it. You just got to be really clued on about how the structure of the directors work and whether or not you have control. I would never sign another personal guarantee unless I had a controlling vote.
I've seen advice where you should always have like a 51-49 split if you want to go that 50-50 type deal.
Well, it's not so much to do, at least within our constitution, it's not so much to do with the equity. It's more to do with a certain amount of equity gets you a certain amount of board seats. And me and Eddie were the only directors that had enough equity to get any board seats.
So he'd be losing his house?
That's a good question. I don't know. And I don't want to speculate. I don't talk to him. I don't wish anything bad upon him. I just feel like he wasn't equipped to handle the whole situation that happened, and neither was I, probably.
You mentioned at some point the directors were concerned about the team members leaving or whatever. It seems like they started actually giving some of the decisions to the employees, even newer employees. How much of a concern do you think that might have been in hindsight?
I think there was like some kind of misunderstanding going on there where, like, we had this finance guy, Andrew, who, Eddie was overseas. I wasn't there. When I finally did go back into work, this guy would come to work at 11 o'clock and leave at 3 o'clock. He was getting paid more than anyone had ever been paid in the business before, more than I was ever paid as CEO. It was weird. It was weird because he was the one that was talking to the judo bank. He was the one that was putting all the numbers together. He was going around talking to investors, and I just couldn't get my head around how, like, they actually tried to present the numbers to judo without me knowing about it. And I was
right. I read that he pitched them without you knowing anything about it. And when you looked at it, there were some massive holes in it, like not accounting for inflation of supply costs. Instead of, they thought that it would get lower for some reason.
Yeah, there was so much in those numbers.
Obvious ones. And then you actually went and pointed it out to the other directors as well.
I mean, I did more than point it out. So when I found about the meeting happening, I said, all right, well, let me see the actual numbers so I can review them, because apparently the other guys saw them and they were okay with them. When I saw them, I wrote, without even being able to meet with Andrew about them, I wrote, I think, a 10-page report explaining in every single detail what was wrong with these numbers and why the numbers were out by about $2 million over the following year. And even when they didn't do anything about that, I managed to convince them to get an external consultant in, Wayne, who was a cost accountant, to go through all of our numbers and all of our financials, work out what we had to have in place and work out what we would be looking like for the year ahead. He wrote a formal report that we all got in sort of, I think, February 2023, which is when it all came to a head, that backed up all of my numbers. It said, okay, you're not going to make $1.5 million next year. You're actually going to lose $1 million and you have nothing in the bank. So this is bad. And it also went as far as to say you could make up all of that money with changes to staff. So essentially restructuring the brewery.
Does he still work in the business?
Andrew?
Yeah.
I think when the new owners took over, I'm pretty sure they got rid of the new GM, Nathan and Andrew, immediately. That's what I heard. But again, I'm talking out of school there. I don't know. But yeah, he was essentially...
He ended up with equity or something.
Well, it was strange because like legally directors can't, like as an employee, you can't go out and take loans on behalf of a business. And so...
No, that's I know that's making a misrepresentation about your, ability to operate on behalf of the company. That definitely is a red flag, right?
And it's also like a red flag. It should have been a red flag for judo. Like I've had these conversations with them too. It's like, what did you guys think was going on there? Like, why do you think I wasn't in those meetings? Like, why do you think it's weird that a company that was founded by this person so publicly and these other two co-founders, all of a sudden the CEO steps down as in never heard from ever again, and you've got a new finance person giving all these projections to the bank to try and increase the loan, but the person who stepped down doesn't want to sign off on any of this, because I said that to them. I said I didn't want to sign off on any changes to loans. Judo knew that. They knew my reason for that, because they knew that I believed the company was dangerously close to insolvent and shouldn't get into any more debt, or shouldn't get a signal from me that I'm on board with what's happening there.
Because you're on the hook for it.
Yeah, but also it was the wrong thing to do. Like I could tell by that point there was no coming back. But by February 2023, like unless overnight you had this huge restructure, there was basically no coming back from that. And their plan to come back from it was to roll out these things that they called initiatives, which all came from a really brief conversation that me, Eddie, and Andrew had on one of the days we had a meeting off-site. And Andrew's like, well, are there any things you've thought of doing to kind of increase revenue? And we rattled off a few things. You put them on the whiteboard. That became like what investors were told was like the plan for the company going forward. Like this company's going to go from basically break even when I left to make $1.5 million next year, because we're going to roll out these initiatives. And it was all as a result of the 10-minute conversation of whiteboarding ideas. And they were never going to make up a shortfall of $2 million. It was just little things like adding food to one of the venues, or like releasing a low carb beer or something. It was like, it was stuff that was never going to save the company. Like the only thing that was going to save it was to acknowledge that this company was no longer a growth company, and it had to operate like other companies do, which is with some financial sense, common sense, basically conservatively, like every other company. The number one rule, don't run out of money.
Would part of the issue here be that you had like knock it out of the park awards, products, like you went and made killer can designs, you had incredible brews, you topped I think you won the awards one year, the best craft beer in Australia. Does that give a false sense of success that might blind someone to reality?
I think it could, but I did not think we could grow our way out of the problem. And I was the one that was responsible for all the marketing before that. And, the year before
normally you'd be expected to be the most blinded, but you were the most conservative on it.
Right. I was the most scared about where the company was at. Let's just face the fact that this company now, all the acquisitions had happened in the industry. No one else was interested in buying us. A few years earlier, maybe there was some interest. To me, it was like this company needs to start operating like every other company where you make a profit and you keep costs to a limit. And if you don't hit those targets, you start losing money and don't get into too much debt, you can stay in business. But I don't know. I think like Eddie, honestly, I think it was a stick your head in the sand type situation. Like he went overseas like 2 or 3 times during that time. I don't think he wanted to be there. At one point, he actually told us he was going to step down as a director, which he never ended up doing. I don't want to speak for him, but I don't think he was having a good time of it. He was very stressed about the whole thing. I don't think handling it particularly well. I think it was a stick your head in the sand. And for Tony, honestly, I just don't think he was that clued on to the detail of things. Like, I don't think he was ever there. It blew my mind when I looked at those numbers that he was like, yeah, this is all good. I can't believe you think, I've seen worse. Him and Andrew would always say, oh, I've seen way worse. We've got a good balance sheet. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, am I crazy? Like, this is a disaster. This company's going to collapse.
These days you could punch it into ChatGPT and it would give you a pretty accurate synopsis. Right?
To be honest, it was so obvious anyway. Like, I've written every report I could. I had every conversation I could. At late 2022, I went back to them and said, look, do you want to, at the very least, talk to a voluntary administration expert? Because I had one on my podcast and he had offered to come in and talk to us for free. Because I was sort of saying, look, we're basically insolvent. And to be honest, I think they knew it too. That was my understanding from that meeting in December. But they didn't even want to talk to this guy for free just because they said, Tony said, this is what I do. I'm around this stuff all the time. I've seen worse. There's no need for any of that. And in hindsight, I mean, the company did go into voluntary administration, but not until they racked up $7 million in debt. If we had have done it at the end of 2022, Judo would have been fine. The investors would have done a DOCA, which is what every other brewery did, where the creditors get screwed, but the original owners still own the business and they get back in there and they clean the thing up. And that would have happened if we went into VA at the end of 22 or early 2023. But because it went on so long, when it came to putting together a DOCA for the existing investors, they were just like, well, even if we agree to pay 10% of the debts that are outstanding, like, this is way too much money. Like, we're not going to be able to operate the company. So it was effectively a liquidation. And that meant that all investors lost everything. All creditors basically lost everything. And a new group of investors who were some of the old investors basically started from a clean slate with a zero debt other than half of the Judo loan. And all investors got wiped. And they emailed investors because they had a live call, I believe. I don't think I was invited to it. I don't know. Well, I wasn't an investor by that time. So they had a live call where they basically just said, what's going on with the company. Apparently, Eddie didn't say a word on this call. He was, the only major shareholder left, and one of 2 directors. But Tony was only a director because I put him there. He wasn't there by right because of his shares. And they were just told all of their investment is never coming back, and they can still get the discounts at the tap room. And that's after promising these investors transparency and over years, and then just turning around and doing that. It's just like, yeah, that pissed off a lot of investors. I know that much. This must have been the hardest
part for you in a way, that it's clear that you advocate for the investor, that the employees shouldn't be running the ship. You also were pretty open about not feeling like you were best suited to be running it, but you kind of took it as a default because no one else was going to do a better job of the ones that were there.
Yeah.
What would you do differently if you went back 3 or 4 years?
I mean, you can't do that because, obviously if I went back, I would have never done any of this stuff. But you can't do that. You can just make the decision at the time. And at the time it was exciting, So
let me put it another way. What would happen if East Coast Roast took off and started snowballing and scaling, and you started to feel like you're out of your depth? What steps would you put in place?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if feeling I was out of my depth is the right way to put how I was feeling. I just never thought, like, when I became, CEO, it was basically a situation where we had 3 founders. Me and Eddie owned a lot more stock than Govs did. Govs was a brewer, a very good one. Not in my view, not a particularly good manager. To be honest, none of us are good managers. But he didn't have any business expertise or background or anything like that. Eddie had no interest in being CEO, and I'd been in business for a decade. I've got a business degree. I looked after the marketing, looked after the finances and investor stuff. I was really the only person who it could be. But I would never get a job as a CEO. I'm just not that type. I don't like it. 99% of that job I didn't enjoy. It was just I was doing it because we were growing the business and someone had to be CEO. Otherwise, it would be weird because people don't know who to go to and that kind of thing. But I mean, you asked about my current business. My desire to grow a business as big as that one has disappeared out of my life. I don't have that interest anymore. I make deliberate choices with my business to focus on profitability and not growth. And that's a very, very different mindset that I used to have. I'm happy if I stay in business and we make a little bit of money and I get paid a wage. Like that would be a really good outcome.
I mean, it's close to my heart. I ran a $100 million business for a while there. And then the last job I had was a $50 million business. And I came at this online stuff as like, wow, we don't have a physical premises. We don't have stock. We don't have as many staff. Well, I ended up getting a lot of staff, but they were at lower rates, admittedly.
Yeah.
It made me wonder, like, what was it? Was it the dream of the three mates having a brewery? And if it was, like, how did coffee end up being the next thing? Is it because you learnt all the lessons in a real business that you could take across to it that made it like a logical choice?
Well, yeah, I mean, in both situations, I had nothing to do. Like the brewery, the WP Curve sale came to an end and the brewery was taking off. And, I owned, a third of it or whatever it was at the time. So it made sense for me to work more in it and it could afford to pay me a wage. So I'm like, all right, I'll just come on board. I'll be the marketing person. I'll get paid a wage and then I'll just make that transition. I originally was not planning on working in the brewery at all. It wasn't really planned. It was just, Guts and Eddie were working there.
Investor.
I mean, yeah, I didn't really think about it. It was like, yeah, we're building a brewery. I didn't think it would turn into, one of the biggest in Queensland, one of the biggest independent ones in Queensland. I just thought it would be a small brew pub and it wouldn't really require that much of my time or energy. The coffee business was similar in that when I left Black Hops, I had nothing to do. I had no job. I had zero confidence. I hadn't had a job in 20 years. So it's not like I'm going to go out there and start applying for jobs. So I started looking around at other businesses. I bought a little hosting company, which I think
Yep.
I'd had an idea of getting back into.
Sell it.
Yes. Yeah. I had the idea of getting into the WordPress support again, which didn't really work out. I got back into it and I was like, I'm not passionate about this anymore. That's why I got out of it. And then the coffee business came up for sale. And I thought, I love coffee every bit as much as I love beer. A lot of the skills will probably be transferable. It was a good business, profitable business, but it was very, very dependent on a few key staff members, which I definitely should have realized at the time of buying it, but didn't. And so we've been through a whole circus in this business as well. But yeah, I figured the skills would be transferable and I want to run a business. So what else am I going to do? It seemed like a good idea. So that's why I bought the business.
Do you take on investors in the coffee business?
No, I'm not. I don't think. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say I would never take on investors again, but I don't have interest in doing that. I don't have any interest in getting into a position where I don't have full control, unless I didn't have anything on the line. I mean, I could probably see myself working in a business where I didn't have control, where I just got paid a wage. I could probably do that. But where I'm taking 100% of the risk and I'm signing off these leases and I know that if this thing collapses, it's all going to come after me. I don't want any other external investors and whatnot in there. I sort of have a vision that, me and Erin both work in the business. She kind of effectively runs it. It's very lean. I kind of have a vision where we can have a good product, a good brand, have it as a decent business for us where we can make some money and have a good lifestyle. It is a lifestyle business, and that's the vision I have for it. I don't have a vision that it would be any bigger than that. But to give you an idea of my day, just because this might be interesting, we no longer have a delivery driver because we didn't have full-time work for him. So this morning I got up at 5:30. I did 21 deliveries before 10 o'clock. And then I go into the office. We've got one of the cafes, the council water main was burst out the front, and you can't make coffee without water. So that was kind of running on skeleton staff. I'm trying to get by there. The other cafe, Aaron was trialing some new stuff there. We've got end of month, so I'm doing bookkeeping, accounting. I had to go get a haircut because I'd be on your podcast and I had to look beautiful. This is like such a weird. Like when I met you, I was building websites. I never even saw another person. You know what I mean? This is just my life now. It's very, very different. But I do have a hope and a vision that it could be just a good, comfortable lifestyle business that that does well for us. But getting here has been very, very difficult. And also I have fear that it'll all be taken away as well, because I'm still not exactly clear on what judo can do to me. I mean, if I don't have enough money to pay them off in full, that's for sure. Not even close. So,
any hope that they would just leave it alone? They're probably not enjoying the press.
I mean, to be honest, other than them trying to take everything that I've ever worked from me, like candy from a baby, they've been quite reasonable.
I guess when you put it like that.
My interactions with them are reasonable. Put it that way. They're not like nasty people from the point of view of how they. I'm only interacting with one person there.
I mean, if you think of it from their perspective, they might think, well, we've loaned some money. We need it back, and this is the mechanism to get it back, which was provided for. So it's kind of logical from their perspective.
I mean, yes and no. To be honest, they knew everything that happened when it first kicked off. I called the guy. I was 100% honest with him. I sent him pages and pages and pages of the story. I didn't want to have a public fight with a bank. I don't want any of this, to be honest. It's fucking stressful. But I said to him, like, I'll go out and I'll get as much of a loan as I can to pay this debt off, and another lease that they came after us for, which I was also on for, which I didn't even think about. And I said, I'll pay you as much as I can borrow, and that lets me keep my house. But if you force me to sell my house, that's a red line for me. That's like my kids have lived. My eldest is 17. He's lived in 17 houses in his life. We're moving house every 6 months. I'm over it. And we finally found a house that we're happy with. We owned. And I said, if you force me to sell this, I am going to fight this. And so that's why we're having a public fight. And that's why all the bad press has happened. And I'm sure they don't want it. I certainly don't want it. I do have some hope that there will be a resolution. But
I do too. I really do hope that. What at the end of the day, what do you think is harder? Is it losing the money or losing the relationships?
Well, I mean, leaving it's scary. This lesson I feel like I'll never fully learn. But like when I was so wrapped up in that business, obviously my girlfriend was there, previous girlfriend was there. Obviously, huge failure on my part on that. All my social activity was there. I didn't really have friends outside of but my whole life was Black Ops.
Your identity was the business.
The whole identity was everything. So I lost everything, and it's not like I'm not looking for sympathy on that, but it was a huge thing. And when people are no longer your employee, I found this out the hard way so many times. They change their tune a lot, which is understandable.
Because of compromise, right?
Well, it's incentives. It's when someone's your boss, you are incentivized to be nice to them, and
because you have the single source dependency, which you don't want to lose.
Yeah,
it just speaks volumes to I think because of my experience, I've gravitated in the complete opposite direction. When I do royalty deals, I have virtually no risk, and I'm not the identity of the business, so I can. They can buy it out and I can move on to the next one, and it works beautifully for all players. It's the sweet spot, I think. But also you're a creator too, though, aren't you? You build and create and you report, and you're so good at that. I think you're suited to starting. I mean, literally the startup guy, right? 7-day startup, starting and creating and building. I just can't help but wonder, what would it be like if you just had one integrator or operator who was really good at taking what you start and building it with you?
Yeah, that's crossed my mind. I have friends that have sort of said, do you want to go into something together? The thing with startups, though, is like I've started so many different ideas, worked on so many different things. They almost always fail. Like, and that's not being a cynic about it. It's just what happens. Like, it's so hard to start something. And buying this business, I thought, well, surely it's easier to buy something that exists already. And also, like a coffee business, I was never going to be able to start from scratch. I'd have absolutely no idea how to do
But
it.
you immediately changed the name and the branding and started doing what you do best anyway, right? So
Yeah, but honestly, none of which worked.
really.
Like, yeah, it
And
was.
you said, I think you said once before, maybe it was at my event where you spoke about it. You said, look, most of these gurus are lying to you. There's a lot of luck involved and most of it doesn't work anyway. And no one really knows what's good or not.
I
Something to that effect.
firmly believe that. And, you can believe that I believe that because I said it when things were going well for me, not just when things are going badly for me.
Yeah.
And I do think it's true. I mean, obviously, there's stuff to learn and stuff you can do better and all of that always. But like when I don't believe that the growth in Black Ops had all that much to do with me. It had everything to do with timing. I mean, we nailed a lot of aspects, but if we did absolutely everything exactly the same as we did, but we started in 2025 instead of 2016, it would go nowhere. We would have a small brew pub and that would be it. There's no way it would grow beyond that. If we had have started 6 months before we did, we might have sold for $100 million. And
Yeah.
all of that is pure timing. And
Yeah.
I mean, you can't say it's 100% luck because you do choose when to start things, but timing is just such a super critical thing, and you never know at the time.
So true. I was building a CFO engine in my AI app, and part of the process was to suck in years worth of CSV files of all my financials. And on one of the pages, there was like my list of products from my old carts and stuff. There was like 93 products. And, I sell two things now, right, aside from the book, right? I've just got two products. And so even I've gone through a massive, like, Chuck, you got to go for a lot of stuff to get the keepers, I think.
Yeah.
So what would you say about then joining your identity to what you do? Is there something you would do to preserve that a little bit with your next version of the business?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm so careful with everything these days. Like I don't socialize with anyone from work ever, really, as a deliberate choice. I don't drink. I don't drink with anyone at work. I'm sure it would be fine these days. I wouldn't. The brewery was a loose operation early days. It was a bunch of dudes starting a brewery, and things were pretty loose. Um, but yeah, I'm really really careful about that kind of stuff. I'm not. I don't mix friends and work, which means I don't have that many friends, like you mentioned before we started recording. But I know who they are. I know who the ones are that are real friends, and there's not many of them. But yeah,
You don't need many. In fairness, I don't think I have a lot of friends, but I'm pretty picky. I'm pretty picky with friends, and I don't know if it's like that with you, but my partner's pretty good at helping me figure out who my friends are as well. They seem more sensitive to it than
yeah. Well, I'm not a super outgoing, sociable person, so I don't think I need too many friends. But I am just as a result of the whole experience completely different to the way I used to be because I am naturally one who will make jokes about shit. And part of the problem with like the Black Ops investigation thing was like all these examples of jokes that I'd told that in hindsight people were saying were inappropriate. And to be honest, they probably are inappropriate. Like I make inappropriate jokes all the time. But now I don't ever do it at work. And there's been so many opportunities with my current business where, certain staff are that way inclined to make really, sexually charged jokes about things. And I'm just staying right away from all of that. And it's not in my nature. I would love to joke around with everyone, but I'm never do that ever again. It's just not worth the risk. So yeah,
definitely
the
not in
lessons there.
2025. I'm thinking about. I worked in the automotive industry, and it was pretty full on, especially in the workshop. And it's a very male dominated, aggressive, macho industry. A lot of dick swinging and pride and ego and inappropriateness. And I just distanced myself from it. I feel like I was lucky in timing that I went through that era. It'd be much harder now. It seems to be very easy to trip over.
Yeah, I think you do have to just make an effort to realize that it's people do need to come to work and feel
Safe.
comfortable at work and feel safe.
Yeah.
And that's totally understandable. And so,
I mean, the
yeah,
example in the book that about the special beer for the employee, I mean, it's frightening how that must have gone down. I'm not going to spoil it because I do think people should get the book. Should we talk about the book, what it's called, where we get it?
sure, I can show you. I actually only opened this today. That's my copy.
Oh,
of it.
there you go.
It's not huge, but
Black Hops Down.
yeah. So that's the book. I don't know. I just want to put it out. I feel like it's the right thing to do to tell the story. I hope it helps people, and I'm hopeful I can put it out and then not get killed because I'm getting these messages.
This does touch a lot of personal notes for me. You know, I used to be a debt collector and I used to get threatened a lot. People threatened to kill me. I'm sensitive to debt collection, risk, etc. And it's something to take seriously. I'm still a silent voter because of those death threats. When I quit my job and I rolled up to my very first client, I got sent this threatening SMS from a guy that I'd actually fired, but he'd sent it anonymously, but I did a police report and they tracked it back to him. And this guy collect military swords and artifacts. He's like one of those military people. And I was very concerned about it. And I got a restraining order and I went silent on the electoral roll. And I don't post shit about my house and stuff. I'm a fairly private person, but maybe speaking up would make it very foolish of them to do something now. It's like on record, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I hope so, but I'm not, I don't want to hurt anyone else. I just think it's the right thing to do to put the information out there because I think the investors deserve it. And
it's like you've always been open about your inadequacies. You've always been open about your desire to give the investors what they invested in. I think that's admirable. For whatever you are or are not, you're very transparent the whole time. It's something I've always noticed, even from your old forum posts. We go way back, right?
Well, it might. I mean, time will tell whether it was the best move.
I don't know. I mean, I have a lot of empathy for you, and I like when you put out the call and said if anyone has a podcast, you want to put it on. First and foremost, I wanted to have you on the show to show my support. This is it's a long game, this whole thing. Secondly, there's so many valuable lessons in here. You did some stuff poorly. You did some stuff responsibly. Like, I think when you're prepared to say, hey, I don't think we're trading solvent, I think we need to declare this. I guess that's where things have made it really difficult, and it's just heaping up the amount of vengeance on this personal guarantee of yours. You're in a very difficult situation.
Yeah, it was, and God, I mean, the last few years, I just can't even. It's a really, really big change. Like sometimes I'll just be like doing a delivery, and I'll just think this is like. It's like should be a movie or something where I just went from being CEO of this big company to just delivering milk.
It might be the movie. I used to remember cutting up floor mats when I was like the top salesperson in Australia, thinking how humbling is this? I'm like got a freaking Stanley knife and I'm trimming the rubber mats.
Yeah.
It's like the best thing is though, like it's just important that you have a lot of supporters. Even the people who reached out to me to ask what's going on, I suspect that they thought that I might know, but I know that you'll come through this because you've done it several times before, even if you try a few different things, and you've got quite a lot of community out there to support. You've always been good at rallying community, and I don't know what the answer is for you yet, but if there's any way that I can support you or help you, I also want to make that available to you as well. But
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I imagine people are going to reach out after this episode. What would you wish for? Like what would be a good outcome for you?
I just, like I said, I want to put the information out there. I want it to be useful for people. I'm not looking for sympathy or support. Actually, I want to say one thing about the book. Every bit of information that related to the financial collapse of the business will be out publicly. So there's 2 posts on my site. One is about the whole relationship thing. The other is about the whole trading insolvent thing. and it's a lot of content. It's like probably a quarter of the whole book. So if you are listening and you are an investor, were an investor in Black Ops, don't buy the book. Just go and read the blog post, and that tells you everything you need to. I don't want to make money from Black Ops investors, but if you put a book out, you have to put it on Amazon. You have to charge money for it, and I think it's a story that's bigger than Black Ops and bigger than me. So I wanted to say that. But yeah, I'm not looking for support. It is actually nice. I put out a few posts where I've sort of been really raw about some of the stuff I've been going through, and it's really blown my mind, some of the DMs I get. Like, you know, I get a lot of hate in comments when there's articles in the Gold Coast Bulletin or whatnot, but I get the most amazing messages and emails from people, and some of the shit I hear, like, I don't know if it helps me, because it just makes me think these poor people that go through so much worse than basically just financial problems. This boils down to. So yeah, you'd be surprised what people are going through. I mean, and like you kind of alluded to earlier, that our industry or your industry has seen the absolute worst of what can happen when entrepreneurs are struggling, and it's scary shit.
It's a lonely sport, this whole visionary thing, which is not like the vast majority of the population. We're doing it differently, whether it's a physical business or an online business, it's just similar stuff. You know, it's like we still have a lot we could talk about in common, even though we're in different industries. And I see it. I mean, I get underneath the hood on so many businesses. I think about 3,500 so far. There's always a story behind the scenes, except for you. There's a story behind the scenes that's not on the public, right? I'm going to say out of 1,130 podcasts, this might be the second podcast where someone's talking to me at a bit of a low and things aren't going well. So this isn't like a curated highlights reel of how fucking awesome you are.
That's for sure.
So I mean, I have to embrace that and bring it in to keep it real for people, and people are prepared to talk about it. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing this. I hope something good comes of it. Hope there's some insights for someone listening. Hope the book goes well for you. And I hope after you've purged everything you can do with this, that you move on in a safe and positive way, Dan.
I hope so too. I appreciate that. That's awesome, mate. And I wish you all the best. I can't believe you're still crushing it. Like, I mean, how many years ago was when you had the event in Noosa? Remember one of the very first events you did? That I think that
Sunshine Coast.
Yeah, that was like the first. That was, I started following you back then. That must have been, how long ago was that?
Probably 10 years.
I think I feel like it's more than 10 years.
Maybe 12.
Yeah.
It was Fast Web Formula 3.
Yeah.
And so it would have been about 2011 or so.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. And you're still surfing a lot?
I surfed yesterday. Yeah, I'm out there as much as possible. I have actually got a surf YouTube channel and website. That's my non-internet marketing thing, and some of the videos cracked 50,000 views, and I've been learning a lot about that and becoming more creative.
That's awesome.
And storytelling. I could learn a lot from you, Dan, around that stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. Surfing's the best. I went for a surf with my son a couple of weeks ago, and it was just awesome.
The ocean doesn't give a shit about breweries or debtors or bad, investors. It's just salt water, nature, energy. It's my rock for staying, sane and normal. I'm having a good life, and I plan to keep on doing that. A lot of the things you've talked about, I really have been able to mitigate against through various, lessons learned. But I think I learned most of my lessons about 20 years ago that you're going through now in those really harsh environments. But there's plenty of people listening to this podcast who haven't, and hopefully they don't have to go through it. That would be ideal.
That would be awesome. I mean, if I can save someone from going through what I went, even if it's just one person, I think that would be awesome. And I think it is shit that I never thought about. So if I never thought about it, I'm sure there's people out there who never thought about it as well. So
one final question. Is the coffee any good?
Well, we just got 2 bronze medals in the biggest coffee comp in the world, so it's
right. Well,
it's not the best, but it's close to the best.
I'll be down your way next week, and I'm going to go see if I can find myself a bag of it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah,
good man. All right, Dan, thank you so much.
Appreciate it, mate. I wish you all the best. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Just after I hung up from this podcast, Dan sent me a message, and he said he had a knock on the door. And he got served more papers, and now Judo are asking for $2.1 million which is more costs, and it's off to the Supreme Court. So I wish Dan well. I guess hopefully we'll get a follow-up and see what happened after all of this.
This is James Schramko.